The news from Victoria remains very concerning. The Premier will stand up later today and he'll update the situation there, but it is concerning. They have called for help, they're getting help. But the key here is that all states and territories again reaffirm their support for Victoria in providing whatever resources they needed to deal with the outbreak in Victoria. To stick to the plan, to stick to the strategy, and to ensure that is well-resourced and well implemented. And that was the focus of the briefing that Premier Andrews gave to National Cabinet today, and he received strong support from all of his colleagues. The resourcing that is being put in, whether it's in testing or tracing, or the support particularly in New South Wales and in South Australia in managing the border town issues is significant, and of course the Commonwealth is supporting that strongly as well. Another key part of the discussion today was that we need to be very careful to protect against complacency in other parts of the country. Now, this is particularly true behind closed doors, not just out in the open. This is a lesson out of the Victorian experience. It's important that we are seeing in organised venues those sorts of activities in the main, although there are some examples to the contrary, that the rules are seeking to be followed. But when we're at home and there are people around, we still have to practice the social distancing. It's still not okay for hugs and handshakes. It's important to maintain the discipline of the social distancing behind closed doors, not just out in the public space. The restrictions on people being able to go to each other's houses have been eased right across the country, with the obvious exception of Victoria. And to ensure that continues, then it's important that social distancing is the norm. It's not the exception, it's the norm, and it's going to be the norm with us for a very long time, until at least we have a vaccine that can be mass-produced and made available across the population. So even in places like in Western Australia, for example, where there is a considerable easing of restrictions, it is very important that the social distancing practices, the washing the hands, the no handshakes, all of these things, downloading of the COVID Safe app is important, because if there were to be an outbreak in any of those places, in Queensland, in South Australia, Northern Territory, Western Australia, Tasmania, then if social distancing is no longer the habit, then we would see outbreaks in those places spread more rapidly. So just because everything's okay now does not mean you go back to the way you were doing things before in terms of social distancing. So I say that as an encouragement, and I say that as reflecting the views of the National Cabinet. We will do everything we can to ensure the protections are in place should those things occur, but the community also has a role to maintain their discipline when it comes to social distancing and the things that are attendant to that. And that is also true, particularly for the younger population. And that we would encourage that discipline and practice to continue. Of course, welcome the Queensland reopening today, which is now effective to all states and territories except for Victoria, obviously. And that is another reminder as to why it's important to maintain the discipline around the social distancing protections. We also agreed today a reduction in the number of inbound arrivals into Australia across those ports that are able to accept visitors, returning Australian citizens and residents. Of course, there are no flights going into Melbourne, into Victoria, for obvious reasons, and to ensure that we are mitigating and managing that risk, they will be cut by just over half across all the various ports that are taking those those residents returning to Australia. There is also a view across the National Cabinet that they are all effectively moving to a charging system for the hotel quarantine that is in place for those returning visitors. Some states already have it, other states are moving towards that, and I will leave that to them to make their announcements at the appropriate time, and where possible we'll seek to have some sort of national uniformity across those pricings, and we're sharing that information with the states and territories. We also agreed today that there would be a nationwide review of hotel quarantine. That will be undertaken by the former Health Secretary Jane Halton. She currently sits on the COVID Commission as part of that group. She will be undertaking that review, working with states and territories, and that again is an important step in providing reassurance and making sure that as we look into each of the states and territories and how they're managing their quarantine, that it is meeting the standards that the AHPPC have advised upon. And as our country opens up again, with the exception of Victoria, that we can ensure we have even greater confidence in those quarantine arrangements as they're being put in place. Other issues that were discussed, we had a very productive discussion today on economic issues around skills and the skills needs and skills training needs for Australians over the next 6 to 9 months. Also, we had Michael Brennan from the Productivity Commission come and present on the regulatory challenges. He made, I think, very important points that more flexible economies would be the most successful in recovering from the COVID-19 recession around the world, and how we manage regulation and deregulation is very important to maintaining and achieving that flexibility to support our economic recovery. We've referred a series of recommendations that he has made to the Treasurer's grouping, the Council of Federal Financial Relations. In particular, we've asked them to come back to us as quickly as possible on what they call the time-based deregulations that have been in place, the changes that have been made to regulation for a limited time in relation to COVID-19 across a whole range of economic activity, and the potential for those to be extended out further and potentially even extended indefinitely, because in many cases they've had quite a positive economic impact.